How easy is EZ Lube? If you don't know the answer to that, hopefully between me and you, we can get that figured out today. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about EZ Lube, we're gonna talk about bearing pack. The weather's getting hot, grease is getting thin. You're gonna start seeing those wheel tire hub assemblies laying all up and down the highways with all the tread caps that are popping off of tires. So we wanna make sure that you're prepared to be on the road if you have the EZ Lube bearing lubrication set up. So let's jump right into this video and see if we can learn something today. So what I have here is a spindle. This is an EZ Lube spindle for specifically a 7K axle setup, but no matter if it's a 3500, 5200, 6K, or 7K, or even an 8K, it's basically the same concept, even though it may look a little different. So this is a spindle, seal, inner and outer bearing assembly with the nut. So we're gonna talk a little bit about how EZ Lube works, why or why not you may want to use it. I'm going to give you my opinion. That and a couple bucks to get you a cheap coffee somewhere. Can you still get a coffee for that cheap? But we're going to go ahead and talk about what I think about EZ Lube after we look at this breakdown. So here we have our spindle set up. So if you look, this is the seal, inner bearing, outer bearing. You would have a washer and a nut, and this is the grease zerk. So this is the lubrication point of this axle. After we go through this and talk about it a little bit, we're actually going to show you how to properly use EZ Lube, what it should look like if that's the decision you try to make. So you're going to hook your grease gun up to here, and you're not going to hook a powered grease gun. So nothing pneumatic, nothing battery powered. Use a hand grease gun, whether it's a pistol grip or just the old standard handle style. You're going to hook the grease up. The grease is going to go down through the spindle. And let's see if I can slip this bearing up. You know, a little hole, maybe. It's gonna come out that little hole right there, and it's gonna begin to press through this bearing. While it's doing that, it's gonna press the old grease out. It's gonna press the old grease through here that's in the cavity of the drum or the hub. Then it's gonna press into the face or the front of this bearing. It's gonna push it out the back, and then eventually into the cap area. And when we go to show you how to do this in a minute, you'll actually get to see how that comes out. But grease in, comes all the way through the system, and then it comes back out. And if you wonder how that works, I'm gonna break this down. I have a cutaway of this spindle to show you. It's very simple how it works. And I will say that if used properly, it does work, but we will get into my real opinion on it. So stick towards the end of the video and I will give you what I think about it. So let's take this apart. We're gonna take the grease zerk out of it, take the nut. So let's look at the inside of this cutaway. Let's look at this side first. So as you can see here, where the grease zerk goes, when you apply grease, it's gonna come down this hole that has been bored in the center of the spindle, and it's going to come down and it's going to have a stopping point. This is about where your bearing sits. Let's see if I can slip that on there. So we'll put the seal and the bearing. So that's where it would go. If we look on this other side, I didn't get a perfect cut, so that actually goes all the way to that hole right there. As you can see, it's right at the base of the bearing, in between the bearing and the seal. Once you pump this full, it will start pushing everything out to the outside, to the inside, and back out the front to the outer bearing that eventually end up in your dust cap. So that's how it works. Like I said, it's really simple. This is not a new technology. This has been around for a while. So basically it just has a hole where the grease comes in and a hole where the grease comes out, which you can see on that side right there. So it's very simple. And again, if used properly, it does work. So let's show what it should look like if you're going to do this on your trailer. And then we'll talk about it a little bit. So now we know all the scientific stuff about it. Grease in, grease out, and you're ready to go another 1,000,000 miles, right? Well, maybe not. Let's talk about it and see. So what we have here is a Lippert axle. It's got some Dexter drums on it. They are interchangeable. They do make some imports that will go in here as well, but this is still an EZ Lube setup. Cap is nasty. This is a bent axle. I just went and actually pulled it out of the scrap pile. I've never had the cap off of this. So the first thing you need to do if you're going to use the EZ Lube is to pop out the rubber plug. I will tell you, if you live in a hot climate like we do, these plugs do not last forever. This one here, as you can see, it has a big hole in it. They all have a microscopic hole that actually vents gas, but this does have a big hole in it, and I don't know if you can see that when it come out, but it had some water in there, so it has some moisture where it had been leaking that hole. I will tell you, if it comes to that point, if you have moisture in there, you're going to need to do more than EZ Lube. EZ Lube does work, but it's not as easy as you may think. It may cause you some trouble. It may cause you some heartache and some grief. From a business standpoint, towards the end of the video, I'm going to tell you what it does for us. So let's grab a grease gun. And remember, do we use a pneumatic or electric? No, don't do that. If you absolutely have to use your electric grease gun, put that dude down on like the lowest setting, because what will happen, it will pump grease in faster than it could take it. And that grease is going to go somewhere other than here. It's going to go out the back. And we have some videos on that. When it goes out the back, that's a bad thing. Brakes aren't going to work. Your brakes do not need to be lubricated. This is not a 9N Ford tractor that has wet brakes on it. This has dry brakes on it. Brakes need to stay dry. So let's get the grease gun. Let's pump a little grease, see what happens. Something else I'd like to mention, you may see this style setup on a marine application. We just done a video on that. This axle in this setup with EZ Lube is rated that it can be submerged underwater. If you don't have this style axle, and if you're submerging underwater, you do take a risk of getting water or moisture in the hub itself. This can be submerged because it does have, if you use the EZ Lube correctly, it does have some pressure on it that's going to help keep the water out. Most of your marine applications are going to have something similar to this. It's going to be a little heavier duty than this. It's going to be like something like a Bearing Buddy, and there's Kodiak. There's a bunch of different brands out there now that is spring loaded, that keeps positive pressure, that in my opinion is a little better for submerged applications. But if you do have this set up and you get in some water, it does help keep the water out better than just your standard grease setup. So let's get the grease gun. So the first thing you need to do is put the grease gun on. And as you're pumping the grease, if you can relieve your other hand or if you get somebody help you, rotate the drum. You don't have to rotate it constantly, but you need to rotate it when you can, just so that the grease is been equally distributed. This dude is probably lacking on some grease. When we get trailers in, they usually either have way too much grease or not enough grease. So we've been pumping for about 5 minutes, and what you'll begin to see is the old grease coming out of the bearing, or out of the dust cap, I'm sorry. And that's what you want, but you don't want to stop right there. That is the old grease. So now it's gonna start coming a little better. So this is normal if you're doing it correctly. You're gonna want to have something to catch it. So this is the old grease that is coming out of the bearings. You're gonna want to do this until you see all the old grease exposed, and then you see the new grease behind it, so that we know that we've evacuated all the old grease. If you want to know how much grease we've used so far, the grease gun just went dead. That's a full brand new tube of grease that we've used on this so far. So I'm gonna take a brief break. I'm gonna get a new cartridge of grease, reload the gun, and I'll be right back. All right, new tube of grease. Let's keep on pumping. If you're wanting to build your forearms for arm wrestling, I'd recommend this. So that's a big old pile of nasty grease. I don't see anything new coming yet. What we're looking for is bright red. And I think at this rate, we may be there by next week. My other grease gun decided to give it up. It's had enough. I was about to have enough. I don't know if I'm starting to see a little red Or it's just some wishful thinking. I think it's wishful thinking. No, I see a little red. Some red starting to come through. Any red in there? Let's see the red. So we've got new grease coming through, and I'm gonna stop right here, and I'm gonna tell you why in just a second. There's some more red coming through right here. So we're gonna stop right there. I'm gonna tell you why I'm gonna stop right there. So we're gonna take a look inside the grease cap. You can definitely see new grease, but you can definitely see old grease, so it is mixed. So the way this is supposed to work is you're gonna pump new grease in. It's going to evacuate your old grease, which is gonna come out of the hole like you've seen here. We have a pile of it. We'll show a close-up of all that nastiness in there. So you want to pump this until you have good, clean grease coming out. Here is the issue. If these have not been properly maintained, if they've been neglected, you're gonna have a lot of nastiness in there. And to get perfectly clean grease, you're gonna be pumping forever. I've been pumping a hard 10 minutes on this one drum. For me, I know I do these, you know, more than your average owner, but I could have had this whole axle torn down, bearings inspected in the parts washer by this point of just pumping this one. Now, if I was on the side of the road, different story. But you want clean grease, because if you got a bunch of junk mix, I mean, it's pretty clean, but there's still some garbage in there. So the next thing we're gonna do is something you would not do in this scenario. We're gonna open this up to take a look at the inside. I'm gonna show you a couple of things I'm looking for. The reason I chose this axle and not a new trailer, this is more likely what you're gonna be working on, whether you buy the trailer used, whether you own it or not. There's a good chance it's been neglected at some point. So this method may or may not work. So let me go grab some tools. We're gonna pop the cap off. We're gonna slip this drum off, and we're gonna take a look on the inside to see what we got. So we're gonna pop the cap off, and I'm gonna show you the first thing I'm gonna look at just for curiosity's sake. So that's a lot of grease in that cap, but it's pretty clean. There is some dirty in there, but for this to work, this is how it's gonna be. Here's the problem. This cap is pretty heavy now because it's full of grease. Going on the road 60 or 70 miles an hour, there's a lot of weight in this cap. The more it spins, the more it's gonna put pressure. I think they call it centrifugal force. And we see a lot of these caps being flung off down the highway because of all the grease in there. So that can will be an issue with your EZ Lube setup. So now let's get in here and take the nut off if we can find it. This is a cotter key setup, and a lot of the EZ Lubes are going to have the cotter key is not going to go straight. It's going to be at an angle, which sometimes causes it to be tough to get out. I do recommend using some gloves in this situation. Cotter key out. So what I'm gonna look for in here is how well the bearings are greased, what the grease looks like, and then we're gonna look at one other thing. I've never torn this down before, so this is not a setup video. Sometimes we do setup videos just for illustration purposes, but this is real life, real time. I just thought it'd be good to do that for this, and we'll both get a surprise. So we'll take our bearing out. And let's look at that outer bearing first. So there is definitely new grease in it, as you can see, but there's definitely old grease in it, as you can see. So we could have kept pumping and pumping and pumping. We may have gotten there, or we may not. So I'm gonna take a wipe out of here. I'd say there's more new grease than dirty grease. But again, there's still dirty grease. Now I'm curious to open the back to see what we have back there. And we did good. So the other thing that we see is, due to time, this seal will become compromised and it will push all the grease out of the back. It will fill the brake assembly completely up because the seal comes out. This has been repacked at some point. Whoever put it in did put the seal in a little too much, but the seal was holding. Now, if we'd have kept pumping, I don't know if it would stay, but we don't have any grease pumped out in here, which would sling all over everything, so that is good. You have to look at the condition of this grease. Give me your opinion if you think it's clean, dirty. Let's just wipe it off on a rag and see. So you have to make your own opinion about that. And then we can look in here. We'll get us a big sample out of here because there's a bunch. That's clean. It's in the middle. Let's pop this back seal out. See what the back seal has to say. And I will tell you, sometimes customers will lie. They'll say, no, I didn't overgrease it, because that's what we do sometimes. We don't want to admit to making a mistake, but I'm going to tell you, very rarely does a trailer ever lie. A trailer will always tell on itself. And they've got that seal so far in there. I'm going to have to go get a heel bar to get it out. Now that we got the seal out, let's look at the grease. I'd say there's a lot of grease in that bearing. I'd say there's a lot of grease in that. I'd say this bearing is very well packed, if we're gonna be perfectly honest. I'd say the majority of the grease in there is clean. Maybe a little dirty, but the majority is clean. As you can see there, there's still some dirty in there. So if you have thin, compromised grease that doesn't come out, what is that going to do to your new grease? I think you know. It's going to contaminate it. It's going to thin it. If there's any type of shavings in there, it's going to get in the grease. It's going to turn into an abrasive. So the question you have to ask yourself, is this best for me? Is EZ Lube easy? I'm going to give you my opinion, and that is just my opinion. This isn't the law. This isn't the unwritten trailer code. This isn't me sponsored by nobody. This is me having a few years of experience, seeing a few EZ Lubes in my time. If you are religious about your preventative maintenance, if you pack these every 12,000 miles or minimum one time a year, you don't overbrake if you have brakes, you don't get into water, you don't overload the trailer and combine that with high speeds, you can probably do this method and it will probably be just fine. You will likely have no trouble. But the question we have to ask ourselves with this setup, and again, I'm not knocking it, if used properly, this is effective. This can be helpful. The problem is, from what I see, and I want people to answer, if you own an EZ Lube and you've ever greased an EZ Lube, has anybody ever greased it like this? Most people stick the grease gun, put a couple pumps here, couple pumps there, couple pumps there, couple pumps there. What do you do when you do that? You just mix new grease with old grease. Eventually it's going to become liquefied. You're not going to ever inspect it. So by doing the EZ Lube method, how well can you see your bearing condition? How well can you see your brake condition? How well can you see your seal condition? If you don't take it down, can you tell if your seal has been compromised or if you've pushed grease out of the back of the seal and it's gotten over your brakes? Your brake magnet condition, your brake drum condition, your brake shoe condition, your brake spring and hardware condition. You may have a big old dirt dauber up in there. Do y'all have dirt daubers where you come from? We have dirt daubers here. Sometimes they'll build a nest in this area. That dirt dauber nest will be super hard. It can break the magnet. Had one today that had a huge dirt dauber nest in it, and it had broke the wires off the magnet. Brake wasn't working. So if you want to use EZ Lube, more power to you, use it, but use it correctly. Just don't go out here and throw a couple squirts of grease and I'll be good for the next 14 years. No, if you're going to use it, it is made to repack the bearing. It's made to push all the old grease out. I used 2.5 tubes of grease on this Wore out one new grease gun. It was probably defective, if we're gonna be honest. Had to go get the old one and change the grease out in it because I had marine grease in it to get all this out of here. I will tell you, we never use this setup. I personally do not recommend this. And before you beat me up in the comments, if you're confident at doing it, do it. You know, leave those comments, say, hey, I've done this forever and it works great for me. That's awesome. Other viewers can see that. Maybe they can see how to do it. Maybe you better understand how to do it. The majority of people, including myself, are never gonna do this correctly. We're just gonna put some perpetual grease in there. We're gonna think, oh, it's okay. I don't need to do my 12,000 mile repack. I'm gonna suggest every 12,000 miles or once a year, tear the axle down, repack it the traditional way. We'll leave a link in the description below to a video that shows bearing repack, the tools we use for that. And the reason, you know, I want to look at the spindle. I want to look at the seal surface. I want to look at the shoes. I want to look at the magnet. I want to look at the adjuster. I want to look at everything. I want to do a brake adjustment. I want to look at the condition of my drum. I want to make sure that if I've been over braking or out of proper adjustment, my drum is not trash. I for sure want to look at my bearings, because if your bearing condition is worn, if you've got it hot, these have been hot. I could tell by the outer bearing, which is the smaller and the one usually to fail. It don't matter how much grease you put in there, you're just prolonging the inevitable. At some point, that dude's gonna give it up. It's gonna come off. When that outer bearing goes, the bigger inner bearing will fit over what's left of that, and it will just sling the hub and wheel off on a 7K, but most of your smaller axles as well. So I personally, and that's just me personally, like I said, that and some dollars or maybe $10, depending if you drink the fancy coffee, the dessert coffee, that's all that's worth. But I'm not a fan of this. If you were a customer coming in here and bought a new trailer with an EZ Lube axle, I'm gonna give you my opinion on it. It may not be popular. Axle manufacturers may not be popular to them, but at the end of the day, they're not out here holding my hand or overseeing what I do. What I see is what I see, and usually these cause more issue than they help people. Another type of bearing setup that's out there, don't see a lot of it today, it's called the Never Lube axle. Well, that's great. It's a Never Lube. It's what they use in the front wheel bearings in the automotive industry. It's a sealed bearing, very nice bearing. Yes, it is a Never Lube, which means you don't take it down, you don't pack it, you don't do anything. The problem with that is most of the trailers I see, and it's in the horse trailer industry, they come in here and it's been 15 years and they say, you know, my hub is loose, I'm hot, I'm smoking. Well, yes, it's a Never Lube, but those cartridges have to be replaced a minimum every 5 years, or they have a mileage cap on there. How many people are gonna keep up with that? You see the word Never Lube, you see the word EZ Lube. It's easy until it's not easy anymore. To me right here, from the sweat and the mess and all the gunk, I'm just gonna tear the dude down and inspect it the old way. Sometimes the old way is better than the easy way. That's just my 2 cents on there. So if you use it correctly, leave a comment. I wanna know, hey man, I've used EZ Lube. I love EZ Lube, it's the way to go. And if you've used it correctly, like we've done in the video, I wanna see how many people have actually used it correctly or knew how to use it correctly, or maybe you just put a few squirts in there. And that's not to call you out. That's just, I just wanna know. I just wanna know how many people, because most people that come in here have no idea how to use this or really what it's for. But if you do use this setup, make sure to put a new plug on there. Make sure that plug is clean so it can't exhaust any gas, because when you fill that cavity full for a submergible application, it does build up heat and gas, and it's got to go somewhere, and it will come out that little microscopic hole in the plug. But those plugs rot out. Like I said, where we live, you can get about a year out on those plugs before it gets dry rotted and starts leaking. So hopefully that didn't offend anybody. If it did, I apologize. You'll get over it. It will be okay. But I hope you did learn something by it. I hope maybe it answered some questions you may have had or some myths out there. But me personally, I'm just a fan of the old school method. Like I started out when I was a kid, packing the front drum brakes on old cars and pickups back in the good old days when that's all they had before the disc brake. But even on disc brakes, we still had regular cone bearings back in the old days. So I have hand packed a mini bearing in my day. We have the handy packer we use today that we'll leave a link in the video that makes it easier. To me right here, this isn't really any cleaner or any faster than doing it the old way. So that's just what you have to decide. Think about it, kick it around, leave me some comments, beat me up if you want to, it's okay. I got thick skin. So Check the description below. We'll leave some links in there for some of the products and tools we use, and some videos that goes back if you want to do a bearing pack video that goes more in depth, even some bearing and race change in there. So that being said, that is all I've got today. So I'm going to leave you with it, and I will see you the next time.